If your creative push has helped you, you can help the show by shopping on Amazon.com. All you have to do is head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right there, and you can shop how you normally would. A small percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping cover the costs of creating, hosting, and maintaining your creative push. And especially with the holidays coming up, you can make a big difference just by buying the things you were going to anyway. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/Amazon, and thank you for thinking of the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 265.
The world needs your story. Someone needs your story, and you owe it to at least yourself to write it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Nikki Rae. Nikki is an independent author who explores human nature through fiction, concentrating on making the imaginary as real as possible. Her genres of choice are mainly dark, scary, romantic tales, and I actually found her via a previous guest, Kelly Killigan, who is Nikki's sister. Kelly was on the show on episode 188. She's a talented tattoo artist. And once I saw that her sister was a writer, I knew I had to have her on the show as well. And she delivered. Nikki shares how she started writing when she was 14, after breaking her leg and having nothing else to do at home. She talks about the frustrating and fruitless experience of querying her first novel out to publishers for over 5 years, and then going into indie publishing, and the differences then that she found between indie publishing and traditional publishing. She talks about how useful it is to be able to interact with and get feedback from her audience as she's writing. And she also dives deep into some of her own creative resistances, such as getting burnt out, and what she did as a result, how she kind of changed it up and made a new strategy of writing for half of the year and then promoting her work for the other half of the year. She also talks about struggling with the imposter syndrome and having to learn that everyone struggles with the imposter syndrome, even Neil Gaiman. And finally, she offers some tips for dealing with that inner editor that always seems to seep into the creative process as we are starting out. Just a fantastic talk with a wonderful author who truly inspired me to get moving past my own creative resistances when it comes to writing a book. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Nikki Rae. Nikki, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We like to start out by giving you an opportunity to kind of give us a brief bio, kind of how you got to the point you are today in your writing career.
It's been a long journey. I started writing seriously when I was about 14 or 15, and it was because I had broken my leg and I had nothing to do, and I was on homebound for school, so I kind of didn't go to school, didn't see my friends for a while, and I would write during the day, and then when they were done with school, they would come over and read what I'd written, and every day they would just want more of the stories. So that's kind of where it started. And then in college, I started taking creative writing classes. I was actually going to school for art, and then I changed my major because people were just had better responses to my writing than my art, which was good because my art was awful. So my professor, she asked me if I had ever thought about publishing, and I hadn't. I just wrote for fun. And she introduced me into the world of traditional publishing and querying and agents and publishing houses. Yeah, that whole thing. So for about 5 years, I queried my one story and got nothing but rejections because it was a vampire romance for young adults, and that was when the whole Twilight thing was happening, so nobody wanted it. But I had a friend that I met in my 4-year college program that told me about self-publishing, and she was pretty much going through the same thing as me. She had a vampire romance that nobody wanted, and she had started self-publishing through Amazon, and she was getting a lot of really good response because while the agents didn't want the vampire thing, because it was so saturated in the market, the readers still wanted it. So I went that route, and about 6 months after I published it, it became an Amazon bestseller. So I've been doing it ever since. Yeah.
Well, and you kind of breezed through that story. I know a little bit about your journey with Sunshine, and like kind of how long it was a part of you, and then before you finally were able to go through that process of releasing it. So could you walk us through that a little bit, because I really want to get into this idea of being an indie author.
Yeah. I wrote Sunshine, like I said, I finished it. I wrote it in 2 spiral bound notebooks when I was 14, and I shared it with my friends, and when I went back to school, they started passing the stories around, and I really liked the idea of...
That's so cool.
Yeah. I really liked the idea of this on-demand, like, people wanting to read your stuff, and that was pretty much what self-publishing was. It was instant downloadable content that people could read immediately after you hit publish. So the idea of self-publishing all of a sudden made more sense to me than traditional publishing for this story, because, traditional publishing can take a year or two for a book to come out. And I had been with it for so long that I wanted it to be out there for people to just read it. So, self-publishing is it's not too different from traditional publishing in that you have to promote yourself and have a platform and all of those good things, but it's different because you're doing everything by yourself. So you don't really have anybody telling you no, like you can't publish this, you can't have a story about vampires because too many people have those. And that's really freeing. Like, you don't have to really answer to anyone, which is what I really liked. I feel like when I was querying the story, I was just asking for permission for my story to be real to people. The more I did it, the more I just hated the idea of other people being in charge of what I wanted to put into the world. So the idea that you could just do it yourself is amazing, because I've done everything myself so far. I just didn't know that you could put it out into the world and have people read it all by yourself either. So it's like 2 parts writing and 1,000,000 parts promoting. So you have to get the word out for your audience more, I think, because there's so many more indie authors. But it's a really amazing community, and we all help each other, and I think it's amazing that I had stumbled into this, and 5 years later I have 8 books. I'm on my 8th book. So
wow.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would have written that many if I hadn't, jumped into it.
So would you give advice then? All right. So in this podcast, like one of the things that I try to tackle, or I guess like destroy, is this idea of needing permission.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of, not just writers, but like artists, photographers, anybody that does anything creative, anything that you're putting yourself out there and asking other people to like enjoy it or to consume it, I think that's something that we all struggle with. Mm-hmm. And I know for me as a writer too, I still feel like I need to go that traditional route. Like I would need somebody to be like, yes, this is worthy of being published. Mm-hmm. So can you help me? Can you help us get past that idea of kind of needing that permission and just to do it yourself anyway? And would you actually like forego, for like new writers, like forego that entire experience of like getting rejected over and over again? Because I think they don't want to take chances on us.
Yeah, well, I think it's different for everybody in every story. Like, for instance, I've just written a sci-fi story that I am traditionally going through those channels, because I think there's an audience for it in the traditional world. But I feel like just with anything you write or create, you have to figure out what your audience is early on. And for a lot of my things, the audience is self-published. The people that read self-published authors, because we take more risks, I think, and we're because nobody is telling us you can't put, that's too dark, you can't put that in a young adult book or anything like that. People want that in the indie world. And that's predominantly what I write, is really dark stuff. So, but I think it is difficult because there are so many, because it's so accessible to anyone. So many people can call themselves an author and just put a book out there. But the thing with that is the audience will always let you know if you are doing a bad job, because they're more honest than anybody you're paying to, you know, promote you or edit your work or anything like that. They don't have a stake other than pissing you off, maybe. But I've found that my biggest critiques come from the readers, which is what you want. You know, you don't want someone who's just in an office going through millions of manuscripts every day, maybe finding something in yours that they find worthy, because they're a gatekeeper, essentially. They hold all the keys in that world. So you kind of have to decide if it's worth going through all of those gatekeepers to maybe get somebody to listen to you and acknowledge that your work is valid, or you can go through and just go straight to the reader and ask them, basically. And if you are a good writer, they'll be nice about it. And if you're not, they will let you know. And I've had people let me know. So I don't discourage people from doing the traditional thing. I think it works. Oh, I mean, obviously, it's good for different writers and different books. It's just the way that the industry has evolved over the past years. It's just a matter of what kind of story at what time is right for the market and right for the agents that are looking for certain things. I'm still learning about traditional publishing because it's been so long since I've queried people that it's completely different from like 10 years ago. So I like letting people make their own decisions, but rejection isn't an excuse to not put a book out there anymore, which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that I know is that, well, actually I don't know this, but the other thing, does it help then to maybe build an audience, a little bit of an audience or a little bit of practice first, and kind of build your own thing and then have a little bit of a proof of concept to send a publisher then? Is that why like you have like the kind of new courage to go back at it? Or is it because like you just 10 years has kind of healed those wounds?
Yeah. It doesn't hurt.
Right.
I know a lot of them say they don't mind taking on new authors that haven't done anything, but I know a lot, because the ebook industry has become so much bigger than print books. I mean, you can buy a book for 99 cents and it sells like a ton of them, versus a paperback that's like $30. People are going to choose what they want. When you put a book out and you build an audience organically like that, just based off of people reading your books, I think that can only help you in the long run, to show them, like, on your cover letter, I have this many followers, or just look at my Twitter or Facebook and see people are interacting with me and talking to me about my projects, and people do have an interest in it. I mean, agents are people, you know, if they see that somebody has an interest in something, they might be interested in it as well. So I feel like it can only help you if you have I don't have a humongous following compared to other indie authors, but the following I do have is extremely loyal. And whenever I need help with something, I ask a question about, you know, what do you guys want to see on this blog post? And like things like that, they respond. And I think building relationships with your audience helps too, because then you are inclined to get more followers, because, you know, as a reader myself, if a writer is talking to me, it's amazing. I love that. So I feel like if you have a presence online already versus you don't even have like a Facebook for your friends, I think agents and publishers would think that's a plus.
And not only like agents and publishers, but also I think it would like what you were saying before about having that immediate response from your readers, like to have that kind of back and forth to see what works, to see what doesn't work. It's kind of like beta testing your own like writing
Yeah,
skills and to
yeah,
like get a kind of like new knowledge as you're like in the process of doing it to see, you know, exactly what's sticking to the wall and what's completely missing before you actually go and send it to like a publisher or try to, you
exactly,
know, go in
exactly.
blind.
Like the other day, the book I'm querying, I have a private Facebook group that fans are in, and I posted the synopsis in there and asked anybody if they wanted to read it as a reader to help me see, okay, I've had like editors look at it and I've looked at it a million times and I'm tired of looking at it. Can you guys read it as a reader and tell me what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong? And people want to help me with that, which is amazing. So not only are they fans or readers, but they become involved in your writing process at the same time, which is, I think that is the coolest thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
What are some of the other drawbacks, not drawbacks, but the difficulties that come from being an indie author? I know you already mentioned the whole like 2 parts writing and 1 million parts promoting.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about that a little bit, or anything else that kind of it presents itself as a difficulty.
Yeah. Well, when you're a writer, and traditionally, I don't have any experience with this, but I'm pretty sure they have somebody help you, get the word out about your book. When you're indie, you either have to do it all by yourself, which I do 99% of the time, or you have to pay someone to do it, which I don't really do because I don't know, I just like to save my money and know that I'm doing it all by myself. Or you have your readers help you. It's hard when you first start out. I didn't start getting responses to my first book until I was almost ready to publish the second one in the series. When the second one came out is when everything started to snowball into this bigger thing. It's hard to find your audience when you first start out too, if you don't know what your audience is looking for. But most books have a wide audience. Like paranormal romance is a huge audience, romance and suspense is a huge audience. You just have to find those places, like either on Goodreads or Twitter, even just searching on Amazon and following indie authors that have done well. That helped me a lot when I was starting out, was looking at other authors that were doing the same thing that I wanted to accomplish and not like copying them or comparing them to me, but just seeing what strategies worked for them and if they had readers that were willing to read books that were like mine. You have to get the word out all by yourself, basically. So it's not a drawback, it's just challenging sometimes because a lot of readers are already bogged down with a ton of indie authors asking them to read their book. So your book has to stand out to them as well. So you don't only face rejection when you're traditionally publishing. And sometimes it's directly from the reader saying, nah, I don't want to read that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, thanks. I read that you are splitting up your time now from like just focusing a few months on writing and then a few months on promotion. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way I was doing it before, I had put out at least 4 or 5 books. I was putting out 2 or 3 books a year. So writing from start to finish to publishing, it would take me 6 months each for each book, and then a little bit in between to put in a book in there somewhere. And I was getting burnt out really fast.
I'd imagine.
Especially because, I mean, yeah. In between that time, you have to schedule, you have to ask people if they want to review it when you're not even finished with it, and you have to promote it before it's out so people know that it's coming out. And I feel like my writing brain was suffering because I was trying to be the business brain person at the same time, which works, but it's very exhausting. So I found that I took a break for like, I don't know, about 3 or 4 months and regrouped, and I just started writing for fun again versus I have this deadline, I have to have this book out, otherwise people are going to forget who I am. So, just writing a lot, it helps me be sane. It's because I started writing for fun, for my mental health. And, I know that I can start a book and not have to have a definite deadline at the end of the year or something. I can just start the book and be like, okay, at a certain point, I know that I'll be done. And then I can just do the next one and the next one. And I don't have to worry about promoting so tightly in between each book. I can just promote half of the year and write half of the year, which I like a lot better.
Right. Well, and then when you're in the promotion phase, do you ever get ideas for writing and you're like, oh man, I desperately want to do this right now. And then do you have to stop yourself, or do you just kind of get the idea down and then focus on it later when you're allowed to?
Yeah, well, for me, it's always worked better if I'll just write down the idea really fast and then just let it sit for a while. So that works out because I can I know that I have something to look forward to that I can come back to when I'm back in the writing trenches. So yeah, that kind of works out for me. Sometimes I can't just ignore it. I just drop everything.
Right. And then do you ever struggle from writer's block when you're in the writing phase, or it doesn't sound like that's a problem for you?
Yeah.
But is it?
Kind of, in a sense, because this book I have that's coming out in October, I've been working on, and I'm not stuck. It's just that I have 3 other books that I'm writing at the same time or plotting. So I get distracted by the other ones, or another idea comes and I'm like, oh, but I have to finish this first. I don't really get writer's block. I get kind of stuck on little plot things or, character traits once in a while, but I just leave them and come back to them and they work themselves out.
Right. How about any other kinds of resistances? Do you have any other things that you struggle with kind of on a daily basis when it comes to being a creative person?
Well, the self-doubt is a big one. I think everyone has that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like any creative person I've met that's good at what they do hates half of what they do.
Yes, yeah.
And
at least half.
At least or more.
At least half, and at least half the time.
Yeah, exactly. Or they just doubt themselves the whole time, or they think, oh, I'm not gonna top what I did that one time. I think it's over. I just gotta get a regular job now. It's done. My creative juices are all depleted. But yeah, I feel like that's normal, and it's normal to feel like you're not doing enough to be the best you can be. But I've just kind of tried to stop myself from thinking those thoughts before they take form. And I just tell myself, look, if you write 500 words today, you've written 500 words that you haven't written before. And even if you end up deleting them, you still did it, and that's good enough. It's hard when you, for me, I write and I edit books during the day, so I'm completely alone most of the time and just in my own head. So it's hard to disconnect myself from thoughts like that sometimes. I mean, sometimes if you're too frustrated with things, you just walk away for a little bit and come back and look at it differently and force yourself to look at it differently. And I found that's helped. Look at it from the side of the reader, or look at it from the side of somebody who doesn't read your genre, and what would they say? Or look at it, a lot of times I look at it as the 14-year-old girl who was writing in the notebook, Did she ever think she would be writing this book for this audience at this stage in her life? And that is a huge motivator, because I feel like I believed in myself so much less then. So much less. So trying to quiet those thoughts before they happen is key. And it's hard when you're an artist and a lot of people don't understand and ask you, no, what's your real job? No, really, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And I used to be embarrassed about, going, like Kelly was saying, my sister Kelly was saying, we used to be embarrassed about going to Christmas or Thanksgiving and being like, oh, so what are you doing with your life? And we would just sit there quietly and be like, we're going to school, but you don't approve of it and you don't think we can get real jobs. So I feel like just thinking back to where you were a few years ago in your artist journey and comparing it to where you are now, even if it's not where you want to be, you're closer to where you want to be than you were then. And that always helps me get out of that mindset.
Right. And also just like hearing people like you tell your story and knowing that people like even I think we both have a mutual, I have a man crush and you probably have a girl crush on Neil Gaiman.
Oh
And
God, yes.
even he still like is like worried that like
Yes.
the fraud police are going to come
And he's huge. Look at
Yeah.
him. You know,
Right.
every single creative person doubts themselves, even if they're the most successful person in the world.
Right. That can always be helpful, knowing that it's like never really going to go away and you're never going to reach that point of like where you feel like you have the permission. Maybe you can be more proud at a Christmas party to be like, yeah, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm whatever, but it kind of like never goes away, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's comforting and also very not comforting at the same time.
Well, kind of talking about real jobs, I know that I think a couple years ago you quit your real job to do editing more. Is that right?
Yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit and like the fears and the thoughts that went into that?
Yeah, so I was going to school, getting my bachelor's degree, and I had worked at PetSmart for 7 years, I think. And I loved my job because I love animals and I love telling people about animals and how to take care of them and stuff. But day by day, you know, it's a real retail job and it was sucking the life out of me. And I had less time to write and less time to do what I wanted to do. So I started looking into, you know, what kind of job do you get when you like to write? And a lot of people are like, oh, you can be a teacher. And I didn't want that responsibility. So I found editing through, you know, websites like Elance or just asking around my indie author friends if they knew anyone who needed editing help, because I've always loved editing so much more than the whole writing process, which is weird.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird to everybody. So my first drafts are usually piles of garbage and just words everywhere that don't belong. Like I write really fast and really sloppily, and then that's because I like going through the revision process so much more. I like just exploring, you know, how I can change it to make it better. And
I hate that.
I know, everybody does. But I've always described it as like, my first drafts are like putting the bones in, you know, and then everything else is building muscle and everything that makes a pretty book at the end.
Cool.
So when I tell people that that I'm a writer as well, a lot of indie authors like seeing that, and because you know where they're coming from and you know, you have so much in common already that they start to trust you. And it's hard to find an editor when you're an indie author that you can trust, because so many people are out to just make money off of you and charge you way too much to edit a book. So I started doing that on the side while I was working at my day job and going to school. And then I finished school and I worked at PetSmart for a summer and slowly just kept telling myself, you know, if I get this many clients, I'm going to quit. And then I would reach that goal and be like, nah, if I get this many clients, I'm going to quit. And I don't know why I waited so long. I just felt like, what if this doesn't work out? What if I am stuck not having money to feed myself and clothe myself? And I'm sure anybody would think that. But at the end of the day, I sat down and was like, would it make me more happy to struggle for a little bit with something that I love doing and helping people that, you know, I wished I could find when I was starting out, or bagging up crickets and fish for people that didn't care, you know, didn't care what you were doing on the outside. So I got up the courage and put in my 2 weeks and just threw myself into making a website and promoting the editing business the same way I would my writing business. I found it's pretty similar to getting the word out about your books. You just have to tell people you're there for them, and if they like what you do, they respond to you.
Very cool. And you're still doing that?
Yeah, I do that every day.
All right, cool. We'll link up that if anybody wants a good editor.
Yeah, it's Metamorphosis Editing Service.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
Well, can I also ask you about that too? Because that's something that I struggle with when I'm writing. I also, my ideas come out real quick, and it's like trying to get them all out. However, I'm like, I struggle with writing down sloppy stuff. You know what I mean? I want it to like look perfectly. Like my inner editor starts right away.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you get past that?
What I started doing, because I would get stuck on pages or paragraphs where I was deleting and rewriting and deleting and rewriting. And what I started doing was word sprints, where you set a timer for like 10 or 15 minutes or however long you want, and you have to write and not change anything at all. So it's really challenging, really
Icky.
challenging. Yeah, and it feels real dirty while you're doing it. And you just feel awful. But then at the end you have like, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 words, and you're like, oh wow, that was way faster than if I had been, you know, deleting this whole time. And then when you go back to revise, you can always change it. It's just, you know, it's not like it's written on a tablet in stone somewhere. You can just erase and change later on. You don't have to be so critical of yourself from the very moment you start writing, you know?
Mm. Word sprints. Okay.
Yeah. Or
I'm going to try it.
Yeah. Or, I got into word sprints through NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month in November. So you have to write 50,000 words in a month, and you can't do that if you keep deleting them. So it's helpful.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try it.
There's
I'm scared,
also,
but I'll try it.
I don't know what it's called. It's a website where you have to keep writing, and if you stop for a certain amount of time, the program starts deleting your words for you. Yeah. So I'm too scared to use that. But I've heard a lot of people it works for.
Oh wow. Yeah. That's scary.
Yeah, that's scary. I don't want that.
Oh man. One thing I wanted to ask you was, when you're telling that story about when you're first writing, when you're like 14, and like people passing it around at school, I don't know, it's just like such a romantic thing to think about, just like physically seeing people sharing your work and wanting it and craving it and like kind of physically being in that atmosphere. Is it the same now, like when you're kind of seeing numbers of people that are downloading or buying your books? I know you do get the feedback from your readers, but does it still have that same feeling, or do you have to kind of remind yourself that these are real people?
Oh, no. I can see, especially if you have Goodreads or anything that's trackable, where readers are using it in real time, like people can just start reading and put like at a certain chapter, oh, I love this part, or this is crap. I feel like it enforces just how real your audience is, because it's instant. Like they can download a book in the morning and by that night they can write a review about it, versus passing it around to your friends. First of all, they're your friends. They're not going to tell you it's awful, first off. I mean, one of my friends would, but most of them wouldn't. So
we all have that one friend.
Yeah. So I think it's more realistic and even more human to see, you know, you can look at your Amazon report and see, oh wow, this many people are reading my book right now, and you know, this many people bought it, and this many people put 4 or 5 stars on it, and things like that.
Does that ever get too distracting then? Like having too much information, or like do you ever get like click and refresh all the time?
I used to be so obsessive about refreshing the portal where they tell you how many books have been downloaded. And I had to stop. It was just too much.
Right.
The same with every time a new book comes out, I will refresh Goodreads and Amazon and see what people are saying. But I'm not as obsessive as I was when I first started, because I've just slowly come to realize that once a book is out there, it's not yours anymore. It's everyone else's. So if they like it, that's amazing. That was your goal and you've met it. But if they don't, you learn for next time, and you shouldn't let people's opinions wreck what you're doing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Before we get to the final push, I was wondering, do you have any resources or anything that you draw inspiration from that maybe we could as well?
Well, everybody's mentioned Neil Gaiman, so I'm not going to. I have read Amanda Palmer's The Art of Asking is amazing and teaches you, I mean, for an indie author, I think it's a really good resource because it teaches you, you know, not to be ashamed to ask your audience for support and help. And if people want to buy your art, they will, you know. For anybody who doesn't know, Amanda Palmer was in a band with a record deal and didn't like how they were treating her, so she did it herself and just started telling her fans, if you want my album, pay what you want for it. And she's made a whole career off of that idea. And I think it's super inspirational. It's written so beautifully, and Amanda Palmer is my idol. So anything by her.
She's great.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love her. And her and Neil Gaiman are together now, so it's like a explosion of creativity. Yeah, it's like crazy that they're together. So, and they have a kid, and I'm like, oh my god, no, there's too much creativity. So that helps. Or I just, I see what people in my field are doing. I see what, you know, other writers are producing and putting out, and what readers are responding to, because, I mean, that's your goal, is to see, you know, you have to kind of be a detective when you're a writer of any kind. You gotta see, you know, oh, what are people reading and how can I make it better? So I don't really have like go-to things that I look for. I just kind of, if I'm feeling down, I look up, you know, okay, let's look at this book that everybody's talking about. Why did they like it? Or a lot of times I will just go to my critique partners and be like, hey guys, I feel like a really bad writer right now. What are you guys doing? And then they feel the same way, you know, even if they're writing.
Just need that.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, all writers and artists, they're all together. You're all in the same boat, and you're just trying to figure out how to make it move, you know? It's kind of comforting to know that you're not alone, and that's usually enough for me. I'm just like, okay, there's other writers. We all do the same thing. You know, no matter what you write, you're in the same boat. And
how did you find your critique group?
Actually, through college, in my creative writing class, you know, basically all you do is workshop in those, and a bunch of us got together and we're like, we should do this after we graduate, and now we do. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I miss college, and like you can be surrounded by like-minded people, but I really want to go take more courses on writing or like editing, maybe even like I don't know, like a whole bunch of different courses, like just to be surrounded by other people and maybe find people to form a coalition.
Yeah.
Scout them.
Yeah, like that always helps a lot, is being around people that are doing what you're doing, even if it's just on the internet or you're following them or anything. Just to know that people are doing the same thing as you is pretty good motivation. Right.
It's like that quote I always like to say, you're the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
You know? It's so true.
Yeah, definitely.
Nikki, before we let you go, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay, no pressure.
No pressure whatsoever. I love it.
Okay, so you want to write a book. Do it. That's it. Just write the book. Don't think about where it's going to go, who's going to read it. Right now, you're the only one writing it. You're the one reading it. And you have a story in you that you need to tell. The world needs your story. Someone needs your story. Even if it's just you at the end of the day, somebody needs it, and you owe it to at least yourself to write it. Even if it comes out like crap, it doesn't matter. You did it. That's enough, you know? You don't have to ask people for permission. You don't have to ask people if you're doing something right, or if anybody would like this or that. Your world is in your head, and it's up to you to make it real. And if you have a world that you want to be real, all you have to do is write about it. Don't worry about it. That's the biggest thing, is just don't worry. It's okay. And if you fail with your goal of, if you want to get it traditionally published or self-published and people don't like it, if you fail, that's okay too. It's another part of your journey to where you're supposed to be as a writer or as an artist. You are supposed to fail. Failure is not the end of the world. It sucks, and all of the work that you put into things and being not appreciated is awful, but you've learned so much more than if you hadn't started to begin with. So the challenge is just to start. And once you start, that's all that matters, is that you've started.
Right. I love it. And then celebrate once you do finish, and see that goal as just to finish the thing, and then just celebrate once you have.
Yeah.
I love it. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a pleasure. And you can find Nikki on her website, which is NikkiRaeAuthor.com. That's NIKKIRAE, author.com. Or on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. She is Nikki Rae Author. And we'll have everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/Nikki Rae. Nikki, thanks again.
Thank you.
Huge thanks once again to Nikki for coming on the show. I think no matter what your creative passion is, there is always going to be some sort of gatekeeper, whether it's imaginary or real, that you perceive to be blocking your path. And I just want to encourage you to find a way around that gatekeeper, or just bust down the door if you have to. It could be scary at first to try to find your own path, to blaze your own trail, but you'll realize that the path that's laid out for you by the gatekeepers, the traditional way of doing things, has a ton of obstacles. It has a ton of pits. It has a ton of banana peels. I don't know. It has a ton of obstacles that you are going to either have to go around or go through or push past. The traditional way of doing things isn't necessarily set up for an easy ride. Sometimes it's even easier to find your own, and it's more empowering to find your own. So I ask you to just challenge yourself and really ask yourself, do I need anybody else's permission to do this thing? Do I need anybody else's permission to forge my own path? You'll realize that you don't. Like Nikki said, you are the only one that can write that book. You're the only one that can paint that picture, write that song. You're the only one that's in control of it. Nobody's going to come around and ask for it. You have to ask yourself for it and then dig deep and create it for yourself. Nikki also mentioned doing NaNoWriMo, and a huge shout out to anybody that is participating in that here in November. I have a ton of respect for you. As you guys know, I am trying to keep up with that word count. I'm not writing a novel, but I'm trying to write a novel's worth of words in November through many different things that I've been trying to write for the past couple years, actually, to get back in writing shape. And oh my God, it feels so good to get back into that, to get back into my writing. I feel so freeing, and I feel like a human being able to express myself again. I am super happy that I decided not to write a novel, because it's opened up a lot of different avenues, a lot of different things I didn't think about before, including directions that I want to go for the Your Creative Push book when I'm going to write it in January. So just wanted to give a kind of a brief update to let you know that this slowing down the episodes once a week has been fruitful, at least for my sanity and my creativity. And listening back to this episode, I'm thinking self-publishing is the way to go. So we'll see what happens there. On our next episode, we have Hannah Yatta. Hannah is a mind-blowingly talented artist who seeks to interweave the parallels of the unconscious with the struggle of the natural environment. We had a really fun talk, and I made a discovery after the interview that I'll mention next week. A very synchronistic type of thing having to do with Your Creative Push. You know, those are my favorite kinds of stories. You can find Hannah on our website, which is hannahyata.com, HANNAHYATA.com. And on Instagram, she is Hannah Yatta. And we'll also have her links as well as everything we talked about today with Nikki at yourcreativepush.com/265. We'll have links to Nikki's Metamorphosis editing services, a link to her sister's interview, Kelly Killigan, to Write or Die, something that Joanna Penn actually mentioned as well. It's that program that Nikki was talking about where it deletes your words. Totally terrifying program if you're a writer, but very effective. And also a link to pick up The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer if you want to get it. And that actually reminds me, if you want to help out the show, when you do all of your Black Friday shopping, if you get it on Amazon, you can go to Amazon through my link at yourcreativepush.com/Amazon, which will take you right to Amazon. You buy everything like you normally would. Nothing costs anything more, but I get a small percentage of your purchases. That will go directly to covering all the costs for the show. I pretty much just said exactly that advertisement that I have in the beginning of the episode, but it really does help a lot, especially last year around this time for holiday shopping. It was super helpful, and it would really go a long way to helping out the show, and I would really appreciate it if you thought about me while you're picking up things for your loved ones or for yourself. But that is it for the episode today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you next time if you need the push again. I love you all so much. Go and get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.